Good evening, everyone. We're just trying to sort out a few technical problems, so just bear with. Right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We seem to have sorted out a few technical hitches, so thank you for your patience. Welcome to the Ealing Safer Neighbourhood Board meeting 25th of March 2025. I'm the Vice Chair, John Martin. Unfortunately, Sarah Kumar is unable to attend this evening, our normal chair, so I will be chairing the meeting. So welcome and thank you everyone for giving up your time. We've got a number of exceptional presentations this evening, which have been requested by the board. So we look forward to seeing those. Can I welcome Richard Cassidy, Ian Thompson, and James Ryan, who are new to this evening. And we'll start with item number 1 on the agenda. Apologies for absence and any substitutions, Sean.
We have apologies for absence from Councillor Nand and Andy Oliver, and a substitution for Jess Murray being Paul Murphy.
Okay, thank you, and welcome, Paul. Minutes from the last meeting, you've all received those. Do I have a proposed and seconder? All good?
Yep.
Thank you. Updates from the chair. I'll leave that item just for the moment. It's probably easier if I sort of bring any updates that I've got as vice chair just under the projects set up, but there's nothing that I've received from Sarah. So we'll move on to item number 4, which is the police reports. So we're going to start with the live facial recognition update from Richard Cassidy. Richard, if you could push your mic, that's it. Thank you.
I'm just having some technical issues at the moment, so is it all right to hand over to Ian just to swap things around a bit?
Absolutely, no problems at all. So we'll go with Project Adder update. Over to Ian Thompson and James Ryan.
Is that working, is it? Yeah, hello everyone. Ian Thompson, Inspector for Project Adder, covering the West area. I'm here today with James, Ryan, who's the Sergeant on Project Adder also, and the person that's missing, I suppose, from our team is Sal. She's the PC that works with us. Yeah, so just to give you an overview really of what Project Adder is, which is often the first question most people have, you know, what is Project Adder? We hear a lot about Project Adder. What is it? Well, it's pretty much, it does what it says on the tin really. So it's looking at addiction, diversion, disruption, enforcement and recovery. So a whole systems approach towards drugs use, which sort of lines up with the government's harm to hope strategy, which was adopted by the last government and has been continued by the current one, and looks at drugs supply and drugs misuse from a multi-pronged approach, looking at the public health side of things in regards to addiction, and then continuing what we do quite well, and we have done, you know, reasonably well in policing over the years, the enforcement side of it, and we're improving with our methodology on targeting suppliers with more precision as we move forward with the use of technology. So that's pretty much what Adder is looking at, anything to do with drugs. And we sit on, along with the Safe Neighbourhood Superintendents, the Combating Drugs Partnership, which the council obviously play their part in. And the idea is that we work closely together with health, education, drug treatment providers, probation, prisons to actually look at the issue of drugs use and how best we can combat that from every angle, rather than just the pursue side of things, which is, as I say, what police are generally set up for. Is how do we pull in partners to improve our total system approach. So just some of the stuff then, I suppose, if we start to look at some of the activity that we're looking at from a pursue point of view. So enforcement, looking at the fast parcels and how that's developing with regards to the importation of drugs into Ealing and Met wide really, from countries abroad such as Canada, Thailand, if we're looking at cannabis. And then more recently, we've seen a big increase in the amount of Class A cocaine coming in from South America, and how our parcel network and fast parcel avenues are being exploited by organised crime groups to actually just import straight into our communities, utilising addresses that are being, that are owned by vulnerable people, that are owned by people with mental health problems and also drugs misuse issues. So that's a big piece of our work that we're trying to get to grips with, and how we then utilise not only our safe neighbourhood teams to action some of that intelligence, but actually how do we pull in more specialist resources that we have in the Met within specialist crime, etc. Also looking at how there is an increase in the amount of people that are being exploited as mules, being sent abroad again that have mental health problems, that have substance misuse issues, that are being exploited to actually travel to these countries and bring large amounts of drugs back via hand luggage, via suitcases that are being put in the hold. So there's a developing picture and threat there also. So that's another area which Adder is heavily involved in from a complete Met-wide perspective, but also then taking that information and that intelligence that we have and actually supporting proactive operations locally within communities again, via the local embedded ADA teams, of which myself, James and Sal are one on the West area. And then continuing to fund the Op Umata, Op Orochi, so looking at drugs lines, particularly around crack cocaine and heroin, which often cause the most harm within the communities and obviously are the most visible signs through those drug uses, high streets, parks, etc. That often are linked in with ASB. So using our Umata teams to actually target those drug lines, and how we can utilise the partnership to obtain community intelligence that we might have from wardens, people working within different social services, how we can identify the exploited and then go after the perpetrators. So that's a large proportion of our work also, from a pursue focus, which a lot of this stuff is probably it isn't something new for ADA, so there is that sort of support for the pursue element, but then actually some of the other stuff that we're supporting locally is the geographical targeting of areas. So mapping out, we've got analysts that work that are dedicated to Project ADA that can highlight where the most drug harm is, whether that be ASB, whether it be vulnerability, and actually how do we come up with what we call a 4P approach to problem solve that, rather than just the constant enforcement, and how can we link in with our local partners to support that. Funding activity, we have done that over the last sort of year or so, particularly last summer, looking at the open spaces, supplying funding for the SNT teams and our proactive teams to patrol those parks and open spaces, to engage with those people that are using drugs, but also again go after those perpetrators as and when they're identified. And I'll come on to the voluntary referral app, which is a new piece of kit that officers have. I say a piece of kit, it's just like a tactical tool they can use to easily refer drug users into treatment. So when we're visiting these parks, we're going after the drug dealers, but if we come across vulnerability, we've developed an app which can be used by frontline officers to refer individuals into treatment, which Ealing have done particularly well in utilising. And then there's a bit on there about the sort of designing out crime. So a lot of the time when we look at a geographical area, we will commission a piece of work with our analysts to look at what does the desktop show us, where are the hotspots, who are the perpetrators, where is the vulnerability, and then we can obviously come up with a plan, in partnership with the SNTs and others on how we're going to deal with that, utilising some of our designing out crime officers who sit within a central team, so tasking them into those areas. So again, we can just support that partnership approach. Some of this drug use and drug dealing will be being supported by broken windows type theories around insecure properties, garages that have been left open, drug dealers getting into there, users getting into there. So how can we help design some of those aspects out? That's another angle that we can come at it from. And that's something that we've done in Hayes recently, but we'll look to repeat in Ealing as and when we move forward over the next 6 months. And then again, it's that diversion and enforcement approach, and actually not just looking at robbery, not looking at shoplifting, not looking at some of these other priority crimes, but actually looking at what's causing some of these crimes. Not always, but not every robbery is caused by somebody on drugs. Probably not every shoplifting is, but a large proportion of especially inquisitive crime is committed by people that are addicted to substances. So again, how can we problem solve that? And obviously every user is different. Every person that's on drugs will have different reasons for using the drugs, or have different motivations to actually stop taking drugs and therefore reduce some of the offending that's taken place. So just coming on to some of the sort of operational bits that we've introduced that can help frontline officers with the diversion and with this sort of pathway into drug treatment is the voluntary referral app, which has been rolled out Met wide. Ealing have led the way really across the Met on the use of that app, especially sort of up towards Southall, is my understanding, where officers have used that the most. And that's resulted in 215 people that have come into contact with the police outside of being arrested generally, that have been referred into drug treatment. And then from that, average is about 15% of those people then go on to engage in some sort of rehabilitation drug treatment. looking at some of the research around that. So if someone goes into drugs treatment, if we're looking at heroin, for instance, and they get on a script, we might not see an immediate reduction in offending, but we'll definitely start to see a reduction in offending just based on the principle that if they're on a script, they are, their offending habits are going to change, but they're not going to need to steal to fund their habits. So that's
Script, methadone.
Yeah, methadone, yeah, as an example. So that's sort of one of the sort of ways in which we can sort of look at that and go, well, actually, if we start to look at them individually and start to look at, it's only in 15%, but actually then if you start to look at the offending patterns of some of these people, you see quite big reductions in offending, which obviously will have an impact in how people feel within communities, the shops that are being targeted, the theft of pedicycle, all those sort of things that we talk about will hopefully have a reduction in those offences. So the app is currently, I call it an app, it's not actually an app at the moment, it's on a SharePoint, but it will eventually later on this year move on to an app platform, which will make accessibility for officers a lot easier. And hopefully we can just continue to drive the use in Ealing and elsewhere in London to increase the amount of people that are receiving drug treatment and the impact that will have on many of the priority offences that we talk about on a regular basis around robberies, so shoplifting, thefts, etc. Just some of the other thematic areas that we look at on Project Adder, which, because we're a small team, some of these areas of business won't always get maybe the attention that we want them to all the time. There's only 3 of us, and a lot of the time we rely on our colleagues within Safe Neighbourhoods to actually do some of the work, and we can support that. So these areas are not something we're always concentrating on, but some of the big areas are Op Remedy, which is our response to synthetic opioids, which haven't massively impacted Ealing from the point of view of people dying and overdoses that I've personally seen so far, but we're seeing elsewhere in London that we are suffering with increase in the amount of people that are dying as a result of synthetic opioids, and also those near misses, those non-fatal overdoses. So that's something that we're heavily involved in, which links in with what we call the eldest process, which is if we come across substances which are harmful and likely to impact the community, there is a sort of notification system in place that we manage in Ealing, and we're linked in with people within the council around that. And I think that's actually housed within the commissioning sort of service area within the council. Drugs focused desks, we're sort of heavily involved with them, supporting them around their drug expert witnesses, and also getting the right outcomes from those drug supply arrests. So if our SNT colleagues or our emergency response colleagues arrest the drug dealer, we will make sure that they've got the support in place to make sure we get the right outcome, that they're not being undercharged with possession and back out on the street to deal again, that they actually are charged and hopefully remanded for the drug dealing, especially if we're talking about dealing of crack cocaine and heroin in particular. Some of the other stuff. So there's lots of work going on around just the mapping out and the analytical work around the sort of the harm matrix, if you like. So looking at who are those high harm drug offenders that are causing the most amount of crime within the communities, so we can actually focus in our not just enforcement again, but our engagement approach on those individuals, getting the drug treatment services into those individuals, getting them on a treatment plan to reduce some of that offending. Cuckooing, another big sort of piece of work for Project Adder. How can we better deal with that issue? There's a new legislation that's going to be coming in very soon, I believe, around it being an actual offence. So that will give us a really good springboard to actually get some improvements in that area, identifying the vulnerability and making sure we're working together as a partnership to deal with that issue. And then the educational piece, Sal on our team leads that on the West area, and that doesn't just include education, it includes our faith establishments that are across the BCU. How can we better raise the awareness and the intelligence flow of information around drug supply and vulnerability? If we're talking about county lines, if we're talking about the use of ketamine amongst the younger population, NOS, vapes, and all that sort of stuff. There's such a big piece of work that needs to be done there, but linked in with education, so we make sure that from a policing point of view, that we're delivering an education that is actually having an impact on the young people, and then we're trying to sort of get the outcomes of that. So trying to measure that's quite difficult, but we do have like the new drug kits to sort of show the young people what the different drugs are, and that's also worked quite well within the faith establishments. So going into those communities and actually showing them what your children may come across, what you might find when they come home from school in their bag, the dangers of that, but also from an exploitation point of view, the early warning signs, if you like, around some of the exploitation county lines and so on. And then lastly, on this piece of work, myself, James and Sal have been heavily involved in the immigration centre at Harmondsworth and Colnbrook. Been doing loads of work down there in relation to not only the drugs that's going into that establishment and how we can better enforce against that, but actually looking at some of the individuals that are being released from that establishment back into the community, and any of those individuals that have substance misuse issues. So looking at, are they being put in hotels that are within Ealing? Where are they? Have they got the support they need if they are addicted to substances, to stop them just going out and offending again or being exploited by organised crime groups? So again, that's another area that we're looking to improve and hopefully start to bring them into the partnership fold a little bit more. So the immigration centre, if you didn't know, is it's a home office establishment, but it's run by a private security company. So we're just trying to bring them in and make sure they're up to date with all the sort of changes in drug supply patterns and different substances, but also looking at where people are going once they are released from there. And so this bit is all around COSART testing, drug testing in custody, how over probably the last 10, 15 years, we've seen that drug workers were in custody. When I first joined the organisation, they were part of the custody team. They were a really useful tool to engage with that community, those people that are addicted to substances, to identify when people are addicted to substances and how to get those people to break out of the cycle of offending and actually get them onto treatment. So across London, there was very few areas in London that had drug workers in custody. So working through the Combating Drugs Partnership, that's starting to change now. So over the next 6 months, we should start to see drug workers in Acton and at Heathrow, covering a proportion of the time. So, weekends, I think, are always going to be a bit of a weak point, evenings, but during the day, hopefully what we're looking at is how can we best use those individuals to capture the most amount of people. And what we've seen over the last year is actually a 30% increase in the amount of drug testing that's taking place within our custody suites. And that's a result of the work that James does with our Met Detention colleagues. But not only that, I think it's the reintroduction of drug workers. Actually, it makes our custody sergeants think, how can I sort of get this person into treatment? You've got a drugs worker there, we can utilise their skills and experience, and then by testing them, there is in most places a mandatory assessment. There isn't in Ealing. So if someone tests positive for Class A drugs in Ealing, there isn't a mandatory appointment they must attend. Elsewhere in London, there is that system. There isn't here. But at least by having a drug worker in custody, they're able to access that and be signposted into drug treatment. And also so that we can explain to them what drug treatment looks like, because I don't know what drug treatment looks like. I couldn't persuade somebody to go into drug treatment, because I don't actually know what it involves. I don't know what that looks like. So having those people there really does help, and I think that's really driven some of our performance in the drug testing on arrest. I don't know if there's anything, James, you want to come in on that at all, on the drug testing on arrest? Anything I've missed?
No, we continue to see figures go up over the last 2 months. They've increased even further. I think 30% is now up to about 45% increase. And the target set by MO9 is 100% of detainees should be tested. But that's never going to be achievable, unfortunately. But 65% is more than achievable, and we seem to be on target to to be testing 65% of everyone who goes into custody arrested for a trigger offence.
So hopefully everyone knows what drug. I mean, have you got any ideas? Anyone any questions on that particular topic, or?
Does anyone from the board want to come in and ask a question at this point? Okay.
No, it's cool. It's just I'm just conscious that I speak the police language, and like and often, you know, we have a certain language ourselves. So if anyone doesn't understand any of the stuff I'm saying, then definitely do.
We do have one question. Geeta.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah, a couple of questions. And I have to say I understand a lot of what you've explained, but not all of it. There's obviously quite a lot of detail behind all of that. There's two questions I had. One is the referral process. If somebody has a concern, can they go to the Met and say they have a concern about somebody, and could they refer them? Because it just seems like a really good process that seems to be very successful.
So,
and then the other, go on, yeah.
So with regards to drug treatment, they wouldn't refer them to the Met to be referred. They should refer them straight to the drug treatment services, and they themselves should have. I don't know the exact details, but they are constantly looking for pathways to get people into treatment. You know, that is something they're constantly doing. I could probably share afterwards the way in which someone could do that, but I wouldn't say the best course would be to refer them to the police if it's just drugs misuse, because obviously that is really, you know, it is a standalone. That would be a public health responsibility rather than policing. But definitely, if there's other concerns around vulnerability of that drug use, i.e. cuckooing or exploitation, then we would definitely want to know, but probably not just on the basis that they are just using Class A drugs. I would say a direct referral would be best for that.
That makes sense. And then the second question is about the education that was on a previous slide that you put up, and you said, because I'm thinking about parents that I have no idea what to look for, and I'm wondering whether education is being done, and whether, John, you were talking about projects, whether, I mean, I would want to get involved in a project, I just don't know what, and it seems like knife crime and or drug are two good areas to try and bring something together for a project, but around education of parents, because I'm pretty sure that people that I'm in contact with would have no idea if their kids were involved.
No, definitely. I think there's lots there really, because you've got like the whole, like in their school bag, what is a warning sign, but then you've got the mobile phone, haven't you? And you know, different emojis meaning different things, different slang meaning different things, and then you've got more broadly around like them coming home with a new pair of trainers and things. But no, definitely, I think around the drug stuff, we could definitely assist if there was any project work, and then some of that project work, if it's focused around drugs, could be sort of done through the Combating Drugs Partnership, I think, because that is where really we should be around the table with education. And like I say, like some of this educational stuff, you know, that if we're going into schools, etc., there's obviously it needs to be, you know, approved, etc. But parents and professionals as well, I think there's a big market that needs to be sort of their IQ on this stuff needs to be increased, definitely.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Maybe John, you and I could talk about that sometime, because the emoji thing's really interesting with adolescents. That recent Netflix program that has really been taken off, the whole area of emojis and what they talk about. You know, it's just like, wow. You know, it's, you know, you just don't know the communication that they're having with some simple hearts and stuff like that. So yeah, maybe that's something you could look at, because I think there is a lot to be done there. For sure. I mean, you're doing a lot of stuff, so it's really good stuff. I'm just thinking about like next steps. Thank you, John.
Fine, Geeta. Right.
Right. I'll quickly whiz through this, but then so then the sort of public engagement, faith engagement. The kits are really good. We've looked at sort of some of the leaflets and that we produce. We've tried to make them look a little less policey, and sort of, so again, just sort of up, you know, bringing it to people's attention, and they're sort of things that we've got budgets within ADA, we can sort of purchase those items, and and again, they can be used by our SNT colleagues or whoever wants them basically within policing or within the partnership to get the word out around some of the dangers, some of the information around NOS, etc. And all the rest of it. So yeah, that's a big piece of work. And what we're trying to do is we're working with the faith officers that work within policing already. So again, just trying to, we can't do it all on our own on ADA. So it's about upskilling the knowledge of our colleagues as well, train the trainer and things like that. So they're the sort of things that we're doing. And I think that might be it. Yeah. So really, any questions? There's lots and lots of stuff going on ADA. Obviously, we're across the whole BCU. I'm not saying you're going to feel the presence of ADA constantly on Ealing, but there will be work that we do with our Safe Neighbourhood colleagues and others that you hopefully should notice as time goes on.
Ian, thank you. Yeah, very impressive. I've just got one question, so I'll start this off. Where does the sort of sex workers and the prostitution team come into this? Because obviously there is a real link between drugs and sort of prostitution, particularly in certain areas across the borough. So how does that work, and how well do you work with them?
We haven't worked with them. We have in other areas. So in Lambeth, I've worked with the Safe Neighbourhood teams who were responsible for that issue in that geographical area. So my understanding is that if there was an issue, it would generally fall to the Safe Neighbourhood teams. We don't really have specialist officers that work locally that would assist unless we need to pull in that professional support. So if we started to look at it and we said, it was part of an organised crime group and this was part of an OCG, then there is central Met Asset that could assist us with that. But street prostitution linked in with the use of Class A drugs, 9 times out of 10 will sit with SNT. So if particular areas within Ealing are suffering from that, then that's definitely something that ADA can support, whether it be through funding. If we're starting to look at things like, chemsex drugs and things like that, there are other specialist units that do work within the Met that, again, we're quite sort of nicely placed to be able to access those SMEs. And again, we can problem solve that as we would any other vulnerability. So, it can be something that we can focus on. But I can't say that we've done anything on it yet.
Oh, that's good. Right. Any other questions? Okay, Councillor Hirsch.
Got a little bit of a bag of questions. Sorry, but obviously this is a very important topic. We had recently an issue in the ward I'm in, which is normally a very sleepy ward and nothing much happens. Drug dealer moves in and the whole area changes into absolutely horrendous events. But I want to bring it closer to the whole borough a bit. So obviously prevention is always the best cure, as we say. So do we have school programs in our schools in Ealing to educate pupils, teachers, and hopefully their parents about the whole issue?
I could check which schools that we in particular in ADA have been into, and that is sort of quite a broad work stream for us. So I wouldn't say that we've been into every school. We're linked in with the schools officers. Again, there's work that the schools officers do that I won't be cited on. So there may well be programs of work around, drugs awareness and all the rest of it, but I'd have to check. I'd have to go away and check to see what schools we've covered so far, and also we're open to, if you have schools that you want us to focus on, then if we have again problem solving, because it needs to be quite precise, I think, with what we're doing in relation to where are the biggest harms. Things like schools, like have we had a lot of children that are using ketamine within a particular school, right? There's bespoke, come up with a problem-solving way in which to solve that. Have we got a load of kids that are being groomed from a particular chicken shop outside a particular school that are going on county lines? So I think rather than be really generic, I think that from our ADA perspective, we could probably be more helpful problem-solving. I think where schools have particular problems around drugs.
Do something, you mentioned a train the trainer program, because obviously you guys are probably haven't got enough time to go to every school, but to have maybe teachers who are interested to be specially trained to then make sure we cover all the schools. I don't know whether you've got a program like that.
We haven't, but no, I think in other areas of London we have had that. So in Southwark and Lambeth, which is another area I cover, there is a piece of work that we're working on to have like a Teams drop-in for all parents and teachers, to be able to do that in a program of work, to do that, to scale it. I suppose that is something that we could definitely look at doing in Ealing if that was required, and that could involve parents, teachers, and so on.
Sorry about that. Two other elements. One is, I think it was mentioned already, it's the drug reporting. You know, how do we advise, we as counsellors, advise people who either see drug usage or drug dealers? How do we advise them best to report that? Is one. And the other side, of course, it's always about treatment, because in a way, addiction for most people is a health issue. Do we think we have enough capacity for treatment, whether that's script treatment or more in-depth? Are these borough-wide, regional-wide, country-wide? Where does that come from?
So the first question around sort of the intelligence and the reporting, I mean, the more intelligence that we have, the better. And obviously, if drug use is ASB, then we obviously as policing need to know about it. I wouldn't say we're necessarily, as I've already said, we're not necessarily best placed if it's just drug use alone. But there is, the more intelligence we have, it won't always fall to our SNT colleagues to deal with it, because, it feeds a bigger system. So that information that, there's a drug dealer and he drives this car, we need to have that recorded on our Met police systems, and then that engages more resources, so that could be really relevant to a specialist crime investigation, for instance, which is looking at that organised crime network. So I think the more intelligent, how important, you're not always going to get a result, you're not always going to get, you ring us and you tell us and then we're going to see an instant result. That's not going to happen. It doesn't always work like that, does it? We know, and there's frustrations around that. But I think the persistence into keep reporting, keep, sharing that intelligence, it does help us build the picture. And then when we look at the mapping, the analytical products, that highlights where the harm is. And you can sometimes, people do get, you get fatigued in reporting the same thing again and again, but actually that there is benefit to that. And I say it would engage, and when we look at where are the harms, that will definitely help. And then the other question was around
treatment. Is it treatment capacity local, regional, and do we have enough? Either the simple first step, which you called it script, and then the further ons, which is full treatment?
So treatment is done locally, like so Ealing will fund their treatment providers. I can't speak on behalf of them, but I can say that they are constantly wanting more referrals and more opportunities to get people into treatment. So from my perspective, I don't see any capacity issues. I think there is sometimes a misconception on whether somebody is always suitable for residential treatment. I don't think there's capacity issues there, but we need to understand that some of these people have families, they don't want to go away from their families, they have young children. So that isn't always, maybe the capacity isn't always required there, I don't think. But again, they would probably be able to speak on, I will not speak on their behalf, but yeah, more referrals, the better, and that's why we're doing the voluntary referral app, because they want more referrals.
Is that okay, Councillor Hash? Yeah. Brilliant. Online, Jags.
Hi, thanks, John. You just referred to the fatigue with reporting. So there's a number of examples. I'm sure most people in the room can share examples. But whilst you need that intelligence, and we all accept the reasons why you need that, the reality is going to be, if people don't see something done at a sensible time frame, they're not going to report it. I can give you one example of something that's been going on for 3 years. It's actually over 3 years now, 3.5 years. Same person, same MO, again and again, week after week. But because it's low level, it's high volume, low level, nothing's really happened with it. It's gone into the SNT over 40 times, photos, times, stamps, does it in front of CCTV cameras. And that's just an example I know of. And then I always start wondering, I'm thinking, well, why would a person that's just trying to get on with their day-to-day life spend all that time and effort doing things when they don't see any action on the low level. Because we talked about school engagement, we've talked about all the great things that you guys are doing, which, you know, not putting that aside, and you're a small team, I can see that. But unless people see that action, and if young people don't see anything happening, the messaging is it doesn't match. If you go into schools and say there's consequences to your health, consequences to life, consequences to going to prison if you do these things, but they see the same faces out all the time, well, then it doesn't match. So what can be done about that? Because you did allude that yourself about fatigue of reporting, and that's one of my biggest concerns, particularly when it comes to low level, as you guys see it, low level street drug dealing. And I'm talking about south, but I've perspectives across the borough.
Yeah, I don't know, and that's why, you know, I'm sort of saying is that we can cry out for as much intelligence as we want, but obviously we're going to have that problem of, you know, well, I've rung you 4 or 5 times this week, and obviously I don't know the details of that particular case. We're always going to have capacity issues. I mean, around drug dealing, you know, that evidentially as well, there's things that we need to work with. You know, open drug dealing. You know, we have it all the time. We still need to prove that that person is drug dealing, and this is why we have the drugs focus desk to actually tighten up on some of that, so that when we do catch these people, because you know, that we actually maximise the opportunity for a positive outcome. Because I talk about it quite a lot. You know, if you ring the police with some intelligence, you see the drug dealer be arrested, if that happens, because obviously, you know, from what you've said is that it doesn't always happen, and then they come out the next day with a caution for possession, then that feeds into that same cycle of nothing's done. So it's not, you know, so there's the front end of stuff that needs to be done, i.e. the arrest, but we do need to look at outcomes and problem solving as well, you know, because, you know, you've probably heard it, you know, we can't arrest our way out of this problem, and, you know, this is part of what ADA is all about. And if we're talking about somebody that's doing something because of a substance misuse problem, then maybe that's the way in which we approach that issue. So I don't know if, you know, user dealers, for instance. So we've got people that are dealing drugs because they're on drugs. You know, probably the better way, rather than catching them and banging them up, is to get them on a script and stop them offending and deal with it that way. So, you know, that's the way in which ADA will approach a lot of this stuff. And, you know, we have some capacity to look at these individual cases and support our S&Ts and whoever else that needs the support to problem solve, if substance misuse is the driver. And then maybe, you know, some way it's not going to be you know, it's not going to solve all of our problems, is it? You know, we are always going to get those people that won't engage and those people that will just continue to offend. But actually, if we can deal with some of the higher harm individuals and those people committing offences on a regular basis, you know, through enforcement and diversion, then I think that is a step in the right direction. But I do get it, and I see it all over London. You know, I do see, you know, people do stop sharing with us because they don't see any action. I mean, you know, I accept that. You know, I would be just as frustrated if I lived in that situation. Does that answer the question? I don't know if it does or not.
Yeah, look, does it? I mean, yes, it does, and I totally get it. I think all I was trying to allude to was that, particularly where the area I'm representing, Southall, and Councillor Martin, I'm sure you'll back me up on this. It has one of the lowest reporting rates. People just don't report because they've got so used to things. There's a technology barrier, there's a frustration barrier, and there's a language barrier. So when you put all that mixed in, it naturally is going to be lower. And when you said you do desk stuff earlier in your presentation, that sort of rung a bell that actually, I know intelligence is fed in through S&T and other things, but the desk piece always worries me, because unfortunately the Met does run on data, and it has to some degree.
And I had a conversation with
because we know the data doesn't show anywhere near the borough. And on your presentation you did say Ealing and Acton, and I saw that there was Southall wasn't even mentioned, and I thought that's interesting in its own right.
Well, it was written in a rush earlier, to be fair.
Well, I mean, if Southall's, if you do something quite regularly, it comes to your forefront. It means it's
I get, yeah, that is probably, yeah, it probably is that yeah, you don't want to be. I get where you're coming from on that, definitely. But it is whoever, you know, and if there's a harm shown and a risk shown, then obviously there'll be, you know, action will have to be taken. So this is why I talk about vulnerability. You know, identifying the vulnerability within our communities, and we have to do something about that. We can't not do anything about it. So, you know, the more we report, the more it will show up on reporting systems. Therefore, when we as ADA run reports to look at where we're going to put our limited access, sort of our assets, then that's where it's going to go. So yes, I mean that, and often like the time and time again, I see, oh, there's drugs everywhere. That there's drug dealers on every street corner. There's they're stealing, and I look on the system, and lo and behold, there's nothing there. And you go, there's not. It's not correlating. So the first step has to be keep report. Is all I can say. Really.
Get that. Thank you for your answer.
Right, thanks, James. Conscious, James, you sort of haven't had, do you want to add anything to this, or?
I think Ian's covered off everything. If there's any questions I can help with, then I will. But Ian's done an excellent job explaining the role of Project Adder. Okay.
No. Thank you both. That's a really good in-depth or a good insight into what is going on with Project Adder. So there we go. Right. Okay. Over to you, Richard. Oh, sorry, James. Absolutely. Please. So thank you for your time this evening, and please stay safe out there.
Could I just add one thing? We're holding an expo on the 9th of April, Project Adder, for partners to anyone who wants to come and attend. If anyone wishes to have an invite to that, let me know. It's going to be it's in Ruislip. It's at McGovern Park next to the Polish War Memorial. It's between 11 and 4 on the 9th of April. Yeah, so if anyone wants to come, we've got some police units there. There'll be some discussion tables. The head of Project Adder is going to give an address, and we've got a really interesting company coming in called Sharp, who do a virtual reality sort of game scenario based thing for children, to do with knife crime, county lines. So utilising virtual reality headsets and like decision making. So they're going to be there. Hopefully we'll get some dog units. We've requested a drone unit to attend, mounted. So loads of police units, loads of partners coming together. There'll be a nice buffet, and you're all welcome.
You sold it. Well done, James. Can we have the details for that, and then we'll make sure that certainly that goes out to the board members. So, but thank you, and thank you for your time this evening. Really, as I said, a real insight. Okay, we're now going to go on to the live facial recognition update from Richard Cassidy.
Thank you, Chair. I have popped the presentation up on the screen. I apologise that I can't put it in presentation mode, but it's not working through for some reason on my laptop. So I hope that's okay for everyone. Just a quick intro. I'm Inspector Richard Cassidy. I'm based on the facial recognition team, so that's covering all of the facial recognition work across the whole of the MPS. We are also a bit like Project Adder, quite a small team. We're currently just a team of 6. We're having a small amount of growth, but not much on top of the 6 of us. I'll just very briefly touch on facial recognition work across the MPS, and then I'll specifically talk about what we're here for, which is the live facial recognition element. So across the MPS, we have live facial recognition as one of the main ones, which is the one that people mainly know about. The second area of work around facial recognition is retrospective facial recognition. And then the third area, which is probably a future project piece, is something called operator-initiated facial recognition. At the moment, operator-initiated has not been rolled out in any form in London. It is something that's been done in South Wales, so I haven't really got any information about that. But very quickly on retrospective, retrospective is what it says on the tin really. Crime takes place, CCTV image, use that CCTV image to run it through a system, and that compares it against the Met Police custody database. And when I refer to that, that's the NEC system that I'm referring to. There is also a national P&D system that's also used. But I will go straight into the live facial recognition element. And I think probably what's good is just to talk a little bit about the history of live facial recognition and how we've got here. So a few years ago, the MPS, along with South Wales Police, were deploying live facial recognition. There was in 2017, 2018, a legal challenge by Ed Bridges against South Wales Police around the deployment of live facial recognition. His challenge was around the NEC algorithm and that deployment of that. That's the same algorithm that the Met and South Wales both use. There was an initial judgment that was found in South Wales's favour, but if we scrap that for a moment, because there was actually an appeal, that there was 5 grounds of that appeal. 3 were found in Mr Bridges' favour and 2 were found in South Wales Police's favour. So some of the areas were around where are you deploying and who's going to be on the watch list. Another area is around the data protection impact assessment and the inadequacies of it. And the third area is around the public sector equality duty. So that public sector equality duty was a key part that the South Wales had said that the system was equitable, and the judge said, how can you say it's equitable if it hasn't been tested? So then we moved to 2022, where there was 5 deployments across London and South Wales. So these were operational deployments in the public domain, not in test conditions, where they carried out a national physical laboratory independent testing of the NEC NeoFace algorithm. As part of that testing, they were looking at testing gender, ethnicity, and age. They also looked at height as well, and they were testing the system with a really big watch list of nearly 180,000 images, and a small cohort of actors, just over 400 people that were part of the control group, as well as the population of London that was in Oxford Circus and Cardiff for the deployments. What they found is that when the system was run at a 0.6 threshold, and I will explain in a moment what 0.6 means, that there was the term used is there was no statistical significance. So any errors in the system was through chance rather than anything else. They also anticipated there was a false alert rate of 1 in 6,000. So 6,000 faces walk through the camera. They anticipate 1 false alert. But operationally, what we've seen is 1 in 35,000. I'm just going to give a slight caveat here. We are currently running the system at 0.64, so that's a higher quality threshold. The reason I'm sharing this 0.6 because for a large portion of 2024 we were at 0.6. So I'll just touch on what 0.6 means. If I have my custody image and I walk along the street past a camera, a live facial recognition camera, and the 2 images of me are exactly the same, the biometric template that takes place gives a mathematical equation for my custody image. And if by some miracle it's exactly the same image of me walking down the street, the 2 equations would be equal and they would equal 1 because they're the same. Because of a custody image versus a CCTV image, there will be a drop in that, so it will be less than 1. But from Dr. Tony Mansfield at the MPL and NEC, they stated that 0.6 was an optimum threshold to work at. But we have moved up to 0.64 just as a result of some false alerts, just to mitigate some of that. Just so you're aware, NEC is a Japanese company that they own the algorithm, and it's a licensed agreement that we purchase from them. So before we even get to any deployments across London, we're doing community engagement, whether it be these types of engagements like this, Safer Neighbourhoods boards. I think, Lee, I was with you last year and the IAG in Ealing. So we do this across the whole of London. It's really important to us that we have that community engagement prior to those deployments to thrash out some of those issues, but also deal with any myths that people are unsure about the facial recognition systems, because as with all things, when it comes to facial recognition, there is the system we use, but globally there are hundreds, if not thousands, of facial recognition systems, and they all perform differently. So we want to have those conversations in these sort of community engagement sessions. We also have a big number of data protection impact assessment, quality impact assessments, policy documents, and all of this we're quite transparent about, and it's all online. So if you Google Met Police live facial recognition, about halfway down the page, there's some brilliant reading if you really want to see the chair laughing there. If you want to tuck into that, you might need a couple of days. Now, with all operations, there's 3 key areas that we would deploy to an area. The common one that we use will be crime hotspots. The other area will be a protective security operation. And then the third area would be specific intelligence. If I focus mainly on crime hotspots, so we use something at the moment called Operation Nightingale, which is to do with high harm crime hotspots. And we use that because that's collated data over a period of time to sort of hone in on where there's a problem area or rising crime. Now that covers the whole of the Met Police district, but it also is localised. So you'll have a high harm area within each London boroughs as well. So people aren't left out. Because a high harm crime hotspot in Ealing may be different to Richmond or Camden or Tottenham. So it's specific to those areas. So as part of that work around that crime hotspot, that gives us the intelligence to go to a location. We then have a watch list that feeds into our rationale for going there, so the crime hotspot, and that together with lots of other things are delivered as a to be authorised by a superintendent, minimum rank of superintendent. So all operations are authorised for minimum rank of superintendent. The final area around making sure people know that we're out and about, and this came through as part of work we've done with the Information Commissioner's Office, is the way we advertise that we're deployed. So we'll advertise both with the signage there that you can see on the orange signs. So those signs will be prior to every single zone of recognition. So if there is a camera pointing towards the front of this building, for example, it wouldn't be, but if there was, there'd be a sign before you left this building to say there is a live facial recognition zone that you're walking towards. It would also give you the option to not walk into that zone because it is a voluntary act. It's not something there is any power or use of force power to ask anyone to walk through a facial recognition zone. And also prior to the deployments, we also advertise on Twitter. And as I mentioned, we've got all our online information that's easy enough to find. So a main bit that people want to know is who is on our watch list, who are the people that we are looking for as part of our live facial recognition deployments. And this is what the authorising officer will be authorising. So we will have those that are wanted by the courts. So when I put MPS there, obviously the courts aren't Met Police courts. I mean those that have been arrested within the Met Police district and they are a London-based court. Those that are wanted by the Met Police. However, this is a high harm offences that we're looking for. So if I'm wanted for littering, I'm not going to be on a watch list. If I'm wanted for a sexual assault, I will be on the watch list. So it is important that we don't just say everyone's going to be on there. Another area is court imposed conditions. So that's multi-agency public protection arrangements. So that will be violent offenders, registered sex offenders that will also be on there. So we can sort of precisely monitor their conditions because I don't know if you're aware, but the offender managers that cover MAPA do have quite a heavy workload, and this gives us the opportunity to precisely monitor these people. And also, in certain circumstances, if we've got high-risk missing persons, they can be added to the watch list. I've noted there that the images used, because it can be concerned for some people, where are we getting our images from? So all the images, I say all, there's always a caveat, are from the MPS custody database. There would be exceptions to that. If I'd never been arrested, but there was intelligence that I was going to commit a terrorist attack, then naturally the police and the public would want that individual stopped. So we will use whatever best image. In the same case, if I was a missing person, high risk missing person, I've never been arrested, then again, it would be my best available image that is supplied. So there'd always be reasons that we would fall outside of that. But on the whole, what we're looking at is MPS custody images only. I will now run through what it roughly looks like. I'd love to say I've got the talent to do this cartoon, but I haven't. So as I've mentioned, prior to us even getting on the street, we've got that engagement piece done. We've got the authority from the superintendent for us to deploy. So we're going to deploy, let's say, to Ealing Broadway, which we have done before. And we're currently deploying in a van. The van itself is actually a multi-purpose van that's a CCTV van. They may be seen elsewhere in London doing other jobs, but if it says live facial recognition on the side, then they are doing what it says on the tin. And the CCTV cameras on the vehicle is that is all they are. Where the work happens is in the back of the van in a server. So if I walk towards a zone of recognition, the CCTV feed takes the footage and feeds that into the server. What the server then does is it does two things really quickly. The first thing it does is a facial recognition. So is there a face there? So a bit like when we use our facial recognition smartphones, it's recognizing there's a face there in the first place. The second bit that it does is a biometric template. So that biometric template is a series of measurements across the face. What the system can't do is it can't say my name, can't say my age, can't say my gender, can't say my ethnicity, can't say my height, can't say my weight. But what it can do is do a series of measurements to give us this mathematical formula. So all we have, I walk towards the zone of recognition, camera, facial recognition, biometric template, and then that biometric template is then what's compared against our watch list. So our watch list size varies from around 14 to 16,000 images. And in probably less than half a second, the system will be able to biometric, facial recognition, biometric template, compare it against that watch list. And if I'm not on the watch list, it will automatically and permanently delete that data and it will be gone. What we physically see on the screens in the back of the van is a box around the face and then a pixelation. It happens that quick. You just see box and then pixelation. So that is what the system is doing the majority of the time. It's been able to do that mathematical formula to compare it against the watch list and then delete the data. There is no data retention. There is no biometric data retention for any images at all, whether it's a match or no match. No biometric data is collated. So there are occasions that we'll have an alert. So in those situations, we have the same thing happen. Facial recognition, biometric templates, compared it against the watch list, and it's now over that 0.6 or 0.64 threshold. And so we'll then have an alert. So the alert comes in a couple of forms. One is in the back of the van, and then at the same time, we have it to the officers on the operation. So we tend to, on the whole, work with the local officers. They know that, you know, they're able to do the wider policing operation and the community work in the area. So they'll be, prior to the deployment, they receive training every time on both system performance, but also what we're expecting from them when they deploy and when they get an alert. Once they receive that alert, facial recognition has done its job and it's given those officers an intelligence feed only, and that is all it is. Whether we're talking live facial recognition or retrospective, it is only ever intelligence only. And what we're now asking the officers to do is very quickly make an assessment of those two images. So they see my custody image and then they see my CCTV image and I'm shown as wanted. They're looking at those two images and they've received an intelligence nudge, let's call it, from the facial recognition system. We're asking them to make a judgment based on an honest held belief. Are those two people the same? And if they make that assessment that they are the same, then we're then looking for them to engage with that individual and start a conversation. And it tends to go along the lines of, hi, you've been flagged by a live facial recognition system that you're shown as wanted. Can you just confirm your details? And that tends to be the start of the conversation. The officers will then do all the due diligence on the street before they decide what action they are going to take. And it is the officer's decision around what action they will take. And the reason they do the due diligence on the street is our server is a standalone server with the watch list uploaded first thing in the morning. So technically it's slightly historic, but that means we're not sending and receiving data. So we're reducing any security risk around that data. So the officers do all that due diligence on the street. And the reason they do that is it could be a false alert. And we have had false alerts. We've had false alerts of identical twins, which can be a challenge, but we'll always look to do as much as we can on the street. So that in a nutshell is how we see it on the street. I'll just move on. I've just got a couple more slides and then obviously I'll open up to questions, but I'll just run through some of the results we've had. I'll touch on MPS as a whole, and then I'm just going to touch on a few local deployments we've done, Ealing, Acton and Southall. So in 2024, across the whole of the MPS, we've arrested 578 people. Those offences include what I've put there. So you've got rape, sexual assaults, numerous domestic assaults. We've had attempted murders, robbery, burglary, breach of sexual harm prevention order. Some of these offences, the offenders have been outstanding for quite a while. Certainly, we've had a case where an offender was wanted for rape. They actually thought the offender was out of the country. So from a Met Police perspective, they'd done everything they could to try and locate this person, and the intelligence they got, they were out of the country. So that helps us there to locate that individual and start to push that forward. So from a victim perspective, we're obviously giving them to some elements, some level of reassurance. We've also checked over 600 people's court imposed conditions, and I do have some 2025 figures in a moment. And this is looking at those violent offenders or those registered sex offenders, and we've been finding that a large proportion are actually in breach of their sexual harm prevention order, whether that be with an individual they shouldn't be with, whether it's with a younger person they shouldn't be with. A lot of the time it may be an offender that's got an index offence of indecent images of children, so they're maybe not allowed to be in possession of an internet-enabled device, and so we're finding them in possession of a number of devices they shouldn't be in possession of. So it's a real precise tactic around those MAPA nominals and being able to sort of focus and work and support the offender managers in what is quite a challenging job. We've also found that areas we're deployed to, if we talk outside of the arrests and the alerts, that actually we're getting really strong feedback from retailers that their staff are not being assaulted when someone's stolen something, and it doesn't matter the size of the company, they tend to employ local people, and so we're seeing that feedback that can we come back again tomorrow tends to be the response we get. And I'll just touch on a couple of final points around the results around Sarah's Law and Claire's Law. So for those that don't know, Sarah's Law is to do with the death of or the murder of Sarah Payne about 25 years ago, and the child sex offender database. So the right to know and the right to ask whether an individual is a sex offender or not. And just over a year ago, we had a young man, 19 years old, with his new girlfriend. His offending was against his quite serious offending against his younger brother and sister. On stopping, the alert went off, the individual was spoken to. The two, in all cases, will be separated because that's private information to that individual. So a conversation takes place with the young man and a separate conversation, just a casual conversation with the new girlfriend. During that conversation, she divulges that he's a new boyfriend, just met the parents. Next question is, who do you live with? And she explains that she lived with just a mum and dad and her 11-year-old sister. So from a policing perspective, we have a massive safeguarding issue that we need to manage. So through the use of the jigsaw team, the disclosure was then made to the parents and then to the girlfriend. And we've got a very similar instance, a number of instances where Claire's Law has also been used. I think actually in Ealing, a Claire's Law was used, where is it a violent offender, a violent sexual offender, and the partner was informed around that. So we've obviously got some great arrests, lots of work around the registered sex offenders and the MAPA nominals, but also there's work that an offender might not be breaching, but we establish other factors when we're there. I'll just touch on some of the facts for Ealing. So we deployed, Ealing, Acton and Southall. So I think it'd be fair to say that the Acton and Southall were quite low on their alerts. Last year in Ealing, there was I think 3 deployments. There was 4 arrests during those deployments. But actually, I think what's been good to see, is it good? I don't know. On the 13th of March in Ealing, there was 8 alerts in total on the live facial recognition deployment. We had arrests for breach of community order. We had someone who was wanted for drugs, possession of an offensive weapon. They're actually found with a knife down there, quite a long knife down their trousers, and also in possession of drugs. We also had someone who was wanted for a domestic related perverting the course of justice, and also someone who was wanted for theft. Also during that operation, through the stopping of MAPA nominals, there was someone that was in breach of their conditions in those cases. So last year, I suppose we had some learning maybe from where we deployed, and there's through some tweaking of that, also through some of the work we're doing around the cameras and the system performance. We've obviously seen that we've been able to sort of do some safeguarding work around those arrests. And from my operational team, they said they received some really positive feedback from retailers when they were here just 12 days ago. So we've seen some really, really good results there. This is the final slide. So I'll just touch on some of the work that we do. So We do have a number of sort of oversight bodies. So on a monthly basis, we meet with MOPAC. We had, some of you may have seen, we had the Deputy Mayor for Police and Crime, Kaya, came out to one of the deployments. We've had the Policing Minister come out to come and see the deployment back in November. We also had some work done with the London Policing Ethics Panel. So that was originally done back in 2019, but they've subsequently come back over the past year and been doing some work around how we're deploying and doing reports on what we do. We've also had work previously done with the ICO, the Information Commissioner's Office. So that's a lot to do around how we advertise, is it sufficient, and the work that's done there. As I mentioned earlier, we have all our data online, which does include our online deployment data. So if people want to see how many arrests were made, how many faces were seen, how many people were on the watch list, how long we were deployed for, then that information is there. And then later on the year, we will be doing an annual report, which is covered within our policy, which will cover some of the bits that sometimes I get asked about, which is what is the demographic breakdown of some information, you know, the watch list, those arrested, arrest offences. So there's some work we're doing around that to create that and see what that looks like. You might not be able to see it that clear on this slide, but there's the Mayor's Office Public Attitude Survey that was published in January of this year, where I'll just read the top line. It says, most Londoners support police use of live facial recognition. However, support is lower for LGBT plus Londoners. And that is, when we look at the previous public attitude survey done in, I think that was 2020, 2021, 2022, that has seen an increase in support for live facial recognition. And one area we are working with actively is LGBT plus partners to try and increase that and do more of these sessions to bring in some of that support. But I will pause there because it's been a lot of talking and open the floor to questions.
Okay. Honestly, thank you again. Another excellent presentation. Okay, online we've got Kieran.
Hi there, and apologies, I don't have my camera. I've got some bandwidth problems this evening. But thank you. That was a really comprehensive and very interesting presentation. So as I said, very comprehensive. So apologies if you did cover this and I missed it. But is this also being accessed in terms of people who are wanted? Is that covering immigration as well?
No, it's not. No,
it's not. Okay.
No.
And the other quick, two very quick ones is one is, and I think I heard you say that this is only for London, so for Met Police and London agencies, meaning if there's a wanted list for another UK police force, does that mean it wouldn't pick those up, or you are sharing that information? That does happen.
So if for us to work with other images, we'd have to have data sharing agreements in place. So our policy at the moment just covers Met-based wanted persons. However, there could be circumstances that there is a requirement. So if there was a violent offender that was wanted from Manchester and there was viable intelligence to say they were in London, then naturally, for the protection of Londoners, we would consider that. But anything that's fell outside of our policy, we'd have to go through our legal team around that before we put people on. So, in short, though, it is those that are wanted by the Met Police or courts within London.
Great, thank you so much. And just one final, again, probably really quick thing is, how is it dealing on a practical level with things like, you know, hoodies, hats, scarves? How does it cope with that, those kinds of challenges, and indeed, you know, religious kind of face coverings and things like that?
Yeah, so I mean, we do have example images, but obviously I'm unable to share them. We've got images of people with COVID masks on where it can still score an individual. We've had images that have got people who've got sunglasses on and baseball caps, so partial face covering. So naturally, the less the system can see, the biometric template will be slightly lower. Mm-hmm. But we have examples where people do have elements of their face covered and it's still performing. We also have large time gaps between images. So 24 years, we've had a 24-year custody image to someone out on the street. So it does perform with face coverings. However, if the whole face is covered, then there's nothing for it to biometric template. So if I was wearing a full face balaclava, with only my eyes shown, then obviously, yes, it wouldn't be able to perform.
Yeah, but I was thinking about things like baseball caps, sunglasses, things like that. So it's not too easy for them to game the system, basically.
No, we're seeing the system still perform. Great. Obviously, because we delete the data, it's like what we don't know, we don't know. So we don't know what we've missed, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's really helpful. Thanks.
Great. Jags?
2 questions. One just follows on from that last question. If officers nearby see people approaching the vehicle and then disguising or covering up, so for example, putting a mask on and whatever, and it looks like they're trying to evade it, would an officer approach that individual, or would they just be let go? And the second question was, in terms of locations and timings, etc., how are you sort of picking up the locations? So I know Ealing Broadway is sort of around the station area, but is that the same for Acton and Southall? Because you said it was lower. And are the timings being done on volume of people, or is it being looked at something else like train timetabling, etc.? And does the darkness take effect? Because the reason I ask that is Southall pretty much doesn't even come alive until 11 o'clock. You know, it's a very, very late start, but a late finish. And do the cameras work in the dark?
So with regards to the covering up and trying to disguise yourself, so this is actually an area we talk about as part of the training to the officers before they deploy. So a little bit like stop and search, just because someone turns around and walks away from a police officer, it doesn't give you grounds to stop and search them. With live facial recognition, if someone covers their face, there's no power to ask them to remove the face covering unless there's a Section 60AA in place, Public Order Act. But because the officers then, if the officer has stopped and spoken to the individuals following them covering their face up, and that would be down to an individual officer's decision around that, they also then have no power to then ask them to remove it and ask them to walk through the live facial recognition system. So it would just be old school policing, let's say, if someone decides to do that. We do find that people sometimes will cover their faces up, and often to try and get a reaction from the officers, and they often end up being disappointed, is what we see. With regards to locations, so the locations come down to the Operation Nightingale high harm crime hotspots.
Jerry, are you on mute or? Oh, that's right. Thank you.
Yeah, so the locations come down to the Operation Nightingale high harm crime hotspots is what we look at. With regards to timings, we have tended to be deploying around midday for around 5 or 6 hours. We have tried different locations later on in the evening. What we find that is when we look at the nighttime economy, unless it's central London like Westminster, the area tends to just disperse from people being there. And as part of our justification to be there is that we think we are going to find wanted persons. And if there's no one around because they've dispersed because of us being in the area, and often with the nighttime economy, it may be a different police tactic is the appropriate measure there, whether that be public order measure or it may just be the presence of uniformed police officers. But yeah, we work on debriefing the deployments and that experience, that operational experience around timings of how long we'll stay at a certain location, and also if the streets die down, is there a continued justification to be deployed there? But we don't. I think you mentioned train times. That's not something we take into consideration. It'll be that intelligence piece that gets us to that location.
Perfect. Thanks very much. Excellent.
Councillor Hirsch.
Thank you. Just to double check, I got that right. So the feed into your server goes from the CCTV cameras which are in an area. Is that correct? It's the CCTV cameras which are already there. No, or is it just from the van?
CCTV on the van, yeah. On
the van only.
Yeah.
So people need to pass that van in a close proximity. So I'm just thinking, you've got a police van there. You have to advertise that you're doing this. isn't any kind of serious criminal kind of, do they not learn and go, okay, one of these, I'll go the other way? I mean, or I avoid that altogether. So why wouldn't they?
Yes, I mean, it's a common question you ask, and I think we see both sides to it. So we see the side of why advertise, you're warning people. I did say I was going to actually give the 2025 results. So just up to today, I haven't got the exact number because there was a few more arrests. We've arrested 210 people so far this year, January, February to March, just in London, and engaged with around about 250 MAPA nominals. So I suppose in answer to your question, we do still have people walk through the camera. Are we missing people because they turn around and go the other way? Potentially, but we're also working with some of the previous work that's happened. So the legal challenge, the South Wales Police, Ed Bridges challenge, but also the work we've done with the Information Commissioner's Office around how we advertise, so that the act of walking through a zone of recognition is a voluntary act with that advertising that we have out. So yeah, I hear both sides to your question.
Sorry for one more. Coming back to people's idea of what happens with facial recognition, and of course it needs further education, because we hear a lot, oh, that's biased, especially racially biased. So are you, and I'm thinking not just racially, you manage the LGBTQ community, so I'm thinking about having makeup. So how are your performances when it comes to these kind of audiences, so to speak?
With regards to engagement sessions, so we
also, how well is the program actually working with these maybe special faces?
I'm not sure what's, sorry, special faces.
No, it's kind of like there's definitely a belief within the kind of probably African American community that, oh, it doesn't read these faces properly, there are more mistakes made, etc. So they might be complete myths, but I ask you, do you have any facts and data? Yeah, so with regards to the system performance, we've had that independent national physical laboratory test done, and one of the key areas we wanted the answers to is any bias with regards to gender or ethnicity. That's an independent test that was done headed by Dr. Tony Mansfield. So that's given us the reassurance around this specific algorithm that we use. I think what's key is we use the NEC Neo Face Watch algorithm, but there's other algorithms out there that may have bias issues in them, but the one we've done is the one that's been independently equitability tested. With regards to engagement, so we do these engagements, whether it be IAG, Safer Neighbourhoods boards, but we also do Race IAG, the Central Race IAG, where we share with them what we've got, and if we're able to give them a demonstration in a sort of sterile environment to show them performance. And actually we have found some really positive feedback from that. There was an academic that said, it's the first time in my life I felt equal when it comes to how police look at something, because it gave us all effectively a number rather than their skin colour being looked at. So we have seen some really positive, but yes, there is sometimes challenge at these engagement sessions, which we naturally expect, but also it's good that we're having those probing questions so people can understand the system.
Jags, is that a legacy hand, or do you want to come back?
No, legacy, I'll pull it down, sorry.
Well done, thank you. Absolutely.
So we in Ealing use this tactic and have used this tactic to the best of our ability, and Rich has given a really very professional presentation. His team came out 2 weeks ago, briefed the officers, and that was a very professional, really up-to-date briefing. We do get lots of questions from members of the public. I went on the deployment, so did Superintendent Lynch, and we do get questions about all the ones that you've had tonight. So it is treated in a very open and transparent way. I did notify the chair before going, and also the IAG chair. So we do advertise that we're going out there, and fortunately last time the deployment was a huge success for criminals and if I may say sexual predators, and it is a real welcome relief to what I believe the community is thinking, that we are using MPS technology to the best of our ability to bring high harm offenders to justice. Is one of the MPS priorities at the moment. So is VAUG, or I say counter VAUG, violence against women and girls, and it does make a difference, Mr. Chair. So I would vote for Richard and his team coming out again. Sarah's not around. I'll certainly be calling you to let you know. We do share the updates with Paul and his team as well within the council. So it's a real useful tool, and I think understanding some of the anxieties of some of the community, but even one of the members of the public said to me, if you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to worry about.
I can only concur with that. Councillor Hurst, one last question and then we'll move on.
Sorry, you said Southall was a bit disappointing when you had an activity there. If I now remember the heat map, so to speak, you know, with the crime dots, Southall was quite a hot area. So why do you think it was not very successful? A good question, bad question.
I was probably unfair to say it was disappointing, because I think actually with a policing presence, and I don't have the stats, but what we do sometimes find is, and I'm trying to do this off my top of my head, I think in Southall there may have been 2 alerts. So there was 1 person arrested at that deployment. So I think that is still we could still say that was a success, but we also obviously had local officers that were in the area where we do receive that positive feedback. So I was probably wrong in saying it wasn't a success. I think if we looked at it solely from an alerts perspective, it maybe we didn't see what we've seen in Ealing more recently. But also we sometimes when we go to an area, when we're working off the back of the van, there are some sort of just general logistical challenges around where we're going, where the cameras can go. Are we limited around the area? So I was probably unfair to say it was successful.
I wouldn't put it down to being unfair. I'd probably put it down to quality, not quantity, isn't it, really, at the end of the day? Inspector Ballard, do you want to come in?
Yes, questions for Richard. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, honestly, but at our last presentation, I remember I was outstanding by the accuracy of the data and the cameras. And there was a figure that you gave with regards to how many people, the negative hits that you had. Is that still around the same figure? Because I think people would be quite interested in how accurate this system is.
Yeah, so I'll give roughly last year's figures, and now I'm going to have to do some maths in my head, but we had somewhere in the region of 700,000 faces go through the cameras, and we had 27 false alerts. So I think that brings us in at about 1 false alert for every 40,000 faces. I think one thing that's important with the false alerts is all it is a false alert on the street. That might mean the officer makes that honest held belief assessment and they say, I'm not going to stop that person, which we've had happen. They've said, no, I don't think that's the same person. I'm not going to stop them. And even in the case of an identical twin, they did not end up in handcuffs and they did not end up in custody. We dealt with the whole thing on the street. So the officers will deal with everything they can on the street. So yeah, in answer to your question, I think it's about 1 in 35, 40,000 images, which we aren't able to employ a police officer to do that at the moment. So unless someone can find me.
That's an incredible number, to be quite honest. So no.
Just final point for me, Mr. Chair. So when Richard talks about the officers do have a handheld device. It looks very similar to a mobile phone. So if members of the public think that officers are just sitting looking on their phone, they're not. They're waiting for a device to be activated to give them those extra grounds to stop and speak to someone. Is that fair, Richard?
Yes, so that is the only signal that is sent from the van. There's no other signal. It's an encrypted signal sent to specific devices. But yeah, they're not playing a game on their phone if that's the.
Well, we welcome you back to Ealing at sometime very soon, and yeah, I look forward to attending hopefully in the next session. So thank you, honestly, fantastic presentation. So thank you, Richard. Very good. You are welcome to stay, but if you wish to go, then please do so.
Yeah, I'll politely decline that, but thank you for having me, and thanks for all the questions this evening.
Thank you, brilliant. Okay. No, thank you, Richard, honestly. Okay, item number 5, we'll move on to ward panels, update from police. Lee.
Yes, so
we've recently relaunched, rejuvenated, and worked with Paul and Ealing Council to try and make our wall panels as effective as possible. We did have some where we didn't have wall panel chairs. Some of the walled panels had not really been running correctly, and some were hit and miss. They would only be once every 6 months, and some not at all. So we did a complete overhaul of all of our walled panels, and that's primarily from this meeting previously as well, where it was discussed. And I'm pleased to say now that this project was taken by my colleague Anil Sharma, and he's given me some bullet points here to say that every wall panel is now up and running for Ealing. So we have 24 wards across Ealing, but the 6 wards of Southall. Oh, Google, sorry. I don't know how that works. I'll move that over the other side of the room. So 24 wards across Ealing. Every ward bar the Southall cluster has an individual ward panel. The Southall clusters, which are 6 wards, we still struggle with chairs and predominantly getting people to join the wards, but we've been actively engaging with councillors and key members of the community to try and change that if we can, but there's no point in having a ward panel that no one turns up to. So we are going to continue at the moment with the 3 ward panel meetings representing 6 wards within the Southall region. That may change at a later stage, but at the moment that's how it's running. But I can hand on heart honestly say that every ward now has a ward panel chair and a ward panel meeting that are every 3 months. We've now religiously started to invite all the councillors to all the ward panel meetings. That wasn't always happening, and it was hit and miss. So that's now a regular feature, and we have had councillors now that have attended the ward panel meetings and have made promises to carry on doing that, which is very good. We've also had a review of the effectiveness of the ward panels, and that's led by the commander, Pavelin, who is in charge of all of the wall panels, and a survey has gone out to wall panel chairs to be progressed out to the wall panel members for them to give honest feedback of how they feel the ward panel should be run, how the good experience and the negative experiences for us to try and make improvements to. And the ward panel handbook was, I think, updated last year, and that's been resent to a lot of the chairs as they've requested it as well through us. But it does give people the opportunity through the feedback to provide their own opinions on what they think they're worth, you know, the wall panels, what they're worth. We do set wall panel police priorities, and there are ward panel priorities as well. So every ward panel meeting, there are 3 what we call priorities. The first one is set by the Met Police, and that is always linked to violence, because that's our #1 task, is to reduce violence to the person, and that can be against women, men, boys, girls, but violence to a member of the community. So that's #1, and we will always link ours to violence. So if we've got a robbery problem, generally robbery is stealing something with violence or threat of violence. So that would be a prime example of what we would include within our priority for that one particular ward. The ward chair then, with their communities, then provides the next 2 ward priorities that ideally need to be measurable and factual, so that we can actually say whether or not we have achieved what we were asked to do in those 3 months. So the blanket priority generally of reducing ASB across the whole of the ward is gone. We don't generally do it, and we try and target it to a location, to a hotspot area,
to say reduce that in that location. We can then hone in all of our officers to deal with that problem and hopefully resolve it. And the other thing that I forgot to mention, I should have mentioned this before, is that all of our Safer Communities officers as well attend the meetings with us. So there is buy-in from Ealing Council within those meetings as well as police. And I try and attend every single one. It's going to make my life a lot easier now that I'm looking after Southall, because there are now 4 inspectors. So it's, yeah, they are effective and they're working, in my opinion. Are there any questions at all on
Thank you, Lee.
wall panels?
Geeta, online.
Yeah, hi. There was a meeting a few weeks back for the. So basically, Jeff, my husband, and I've always attended the meetings, but we haven't been receiving any notifications of them recently, and I found out about them quite incidentally. The last one was because I was going to meet with one of the councillors about something completely separate, and he said, "Oh, shall we meet before that and have a chat?" And I said, "Well, I didn't even know there was one," and that was being held. It's the one that covers Pitsanger, and yeah, I had no idea. So I don't know what's happened to advertising them. So this thing about attendance, I think you get a lot more if people actually knew that they were happening. Certainly, yeah, I don't know how they're being advertised or being put out to people to attend.
So the majority of the meetings are advertised. Well, I wouldn't say the majority, a lot of them are advertised by the ward chairs who send out emails to relevant parties. We also advertise them. The one worry is that it then becomes a public meeting and people then just attend to vent their frustration on either the police or the council. They are generally closed community meetings where we have key community members that represent their communities on that ward that can provide police and the council with their opinions on things that are working well and things that are not working so well. So we do have to be careful how we advertise them so it doesn't become a public meeting. But we do rely on the ward chairs to provide the information of the key community contacts so that they are aware that the meetings are occurring, and the councillors as well, who also can invite people to the meeting with the agreement of the ward chair. Does that sort of answer it?
Yeah, it does answer it to some extent. I'm still not sure what happened with the fact that, you know, I was getting informed and then suddenly that just completely stopped. So
Can I ask how you were getting informed before? Was it from the ward chair or was it via police?
Both actually. So
Sorry, I
getting
missed.
information. Both.
Oh, okay. Pitsanger.
Yeah, Geeta,
Okay.
I'm going to take that one away as an action, and I'll come back to you. But when we speak about the projects, I'll find out how that breakdown happened. Because I wasn't able to attend. Yeah, I wasn't able to attend myself the last meeting due to a massive direct clash. But yeah, I know Nigel and the Pitsanger team are normally very good at sending out communication. So I will look into that for you and get back to you on that.
Brilliant. Thank you. Because they are good. So thank you.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Any other questions? I've got no hands up. Councillor Hirsch? James, do you want to add anything? No.
John, I did have my hand up, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Oh, James, I can't see it. Sorry.
I'm taking it down, that's fine.
Oh, okay.
Couple of things. Lee, you mentioned the ward panel handbook. Are you able to share that? Because that's news to me. I wasn't aware there was a handbook.
Yes, I can. I've actually recently shared it with Sue Hardy, and she's actually been quite impressed with what's documented in there. So, yeah, I'm happy to share that. I'll probably do that through John, if that's okay. It's probably going
Yeah,
to be the easiest thing, and then you could forward it to whoever needs it. And Paul, if I copy you in as well.
Yeah.
Oh,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Yeah,
I'm being told it's online as well.
Oh,
I wasn't
okay,
aware
yeah.
of that, but I have a copy of it.
but we'll get one.
PDF copy.
Okay,
And
Ruki.
in terms of the-
Oh, sorry, Jag. So you're not finished now.
No, sorry, one other thing. In terms of the numbers, and whilst the meetings are sort of partially closed, in terms of the numbers, are the minutes going to be available outside the people that attend the meeting? And is it publicly visible, or is that going to be closed? And are we tracking the numbers of attendees? Because that's obviously been the issue as well previously, why board panels fell aside, so that we're still saying, is it a good use of time and good use of resource?
As far as I'm aware, and I'm not an expert on this, but the minutes are not publicly shared. But the ward priorities, the 3 priorities, should be now on all of our ward, on all of our websites for our ward. They're listed on our priorities, on our contact details. It will then, you can then click on ward priorities and they should all show up there.
Yeah, nice. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Jags. Ruki.
Hi, good evening. So Rookie Johal, I'm the Ealing Broadway Ward Panel Chair. Lee, I just wanted to check, is the handbook the terms of reference or something completely different?
No, it's the same thing. It's terms of reference, how a ward panel should be run.
Well, they're my terms of reference by any chance. Do you remember I produced one and then I shared it?
Oh, I don't know. This is a centrally Metropolitan Police produced one, as far as I'm aware. So
because I produced it and provided it. Sorry, I produced one and then someone asked me for them to use widely, but yeah. But it actually does deal with things like minutes, how often they should be run, how, people coming to the panel should come through the chair. So you do need to vet people a bit. As as well as I do, there's all sorts of people out in the community and they see it as a place to vent sometimes, which can take up precious time. So yeah, sorry, that was it.
If I send you the handbook,
yeah,
perhaps you
John,
can compare it, and perhaps we can have a discussion afterwards to see what you think should be added to it, because it's an ongoing piece of work that can be changed. And I'm sure that from the survey, if there's anything significant from the survey that stands out, I'm sure that it will be added, or something's maybe taken away. But yeah, I have to say, you have the gold standard ward, because you have probably about 20 people that turn up to yours. When I've been there before, 25 plus sometimes.
Yep, absolutely. It is very well. But I have to say, we get great support. Everyone likes the police team as well. John, Emily, absolutely brilliant, and the amount of information they give is really, really good. So I think that helps a lot.
And we're driving that through all of our officers, through all of our PCSOs, to provide that information, to make sure everyone turns up to the ward panel meeting. And that includes myself as well, and some of the other inspectors, to give that cover from the police and try and drive the wards to become like yours, basically.
Yeah, that's really good. And we also, PC Emily Waite, came along to the Ealing Broadway ward meeting, which is held by the councillors. So I don't know if you knew that, but she kind of gives quite a bit of information about the police work in that as well, but really useful tips, stuff that I think I've sent it to some people that were on this meeting last time. Some residents or ward panel chairs, just about the survey perhaps, or the safe, I've got it here, next door page, how to provide information through that, the link to street safer steps, lots of really useful things that the police have, lots of these initiatives going on at the kind of community level, which I think is really important to share. But I mean, sending an email to us with a list of them, which Emily kindly did, and then we sent them out to the ward panel. But if you can sort of do that in any other forum through this meeting, it would be great. I mean, I can send that on to you, John, if that helps in any way.
Yeah, it would, and I was going to sort of cheekily ask for an invite to your next one so I can observe if that's all
You
right.
can learn.
I can learn, absolutely. No, I mean, I've been extremely pleased with how Norwood Green has kicked off, and Norwood Green and Southall Green, to be fair.
Yeah.
But we've had our challenges with the meeting, with individuals who do turn up. So we do have experience of how disruptors can disrupt a meeting. So I think it is really important that everything is done through the chair. And I think the handbook quite clearly says that. So I think we need to sit and basically follow those rules and regulations, I suppose, is the best way to put it. But no, it's been really interesting, and I know that there is a huge challenge across Southall. So if there were members of the board that were able to assist with sort of speaking to contacts over there, that would be useful, because it has been a big challenge. And, you know, I know Jags is obviously all over it as well, and myself, but it's finding the right people. It's not about just putting people in there just for the sake of running a panel. However, we do need to have as many of these panels up and running so that basically every community is represented. Simple as, isn't it?
Absolutely.
All right, so brilliant. No, well, thanks for the update, gentlemen. So that leads nicely, as we head north to about 10 to 9 into projects update. I'll just touch base on the current projects for this year. We have 3 in operation, which I've spoken about before. There is one project which still hasn't started, which is an Ealing self-defence project, which was put forward. Unfortunately, despite many attempts to get hold of the individual and having secured the funding for this project, they've not come forward. So the money is sitting there. If we happen to know someone who wants £5,300, then I've got that money secured. All I need to do is go back to MOPAC to basically switch a project. However, we are really running out of time for this year. Moving forward, I'm delighted, and I hope you all received the email. If you didn't, put your hand up. So I attended a meeting with a number of other panel chairs, and I have to say, I think I mentioned it at the last meeting, we weren't 100% sure whether or not we were going to get any funding moving forward, but delighted to say that we have received funding, which basically alerts to projects, and as per the email, £17,587, with a further 5,200, which is the admin fee, but that has been kindly passed to the board to spend on a project, which is I'm eternally grateful for. So therefore, we do have a serious amount of money again. I really am looking for, if we can, new projects to come forward. There must be just charities out there, people out there who need some funding to run these projects. MOPAC have suggested a maximum sort of £5,000 project, but as per my email, it's sort of quite clearly set out. Whilst the time frame is quite short, the reason behind that was, if I'm being brutally honest, MOPAC made a bit of a boo-boo and sent out the wrong definitions of what the projects they wanted them to be. They then had to, luckily I hadn't sent it out to the board, but then they had to revise them very quickly. So they've sort of made the 4 priorities that were last year now into 3. Effectively the 3 are 4, but it's just the way that MOPAC are doing it. So I mean, I'll put it all in the minutes that's here. As I said, one of the other sort of quite clear objectives that MOPAC have said is more in the protection point than anything else, that as the project lead, that any projects that go forward are to be minuted and that we as a board must accept it, and it must be noted that we have accepted each and every one. And it's really, I think, just to cover those project leads. So if you know of anybody out there that is looking for some funding that will fit any of the 3 criteria, please do let me know. I know that there is a project that's currently running in Walpole Park, and the second one coming up, which is run by the Met in relation to protecting women at night. And they've already approached me about potentially doing something sort of North Ealing based, so up sort of around Pitshanger Park. So again, very much around violence against women and girls. So I'd like to look at that as a project, but again, we'll look at what funding they require, and I'll certainly bring that to the next meeting. So that's certainly something. And as I've said in the timescale and the diary note, I will be approaching future projects, but we don't have to go with them as a board. But to be fair, I would like to sort of spend the money that we've got, and I think certainly show MOPAC that we can sort of produce sensible, realistic, genuine projects that will help our community, and that's what we're here to do. That's the update that I've got on the projects. Is there any questions? Go on, Councillor Hirsch, you've had loads tonight. No, you can't. No, well, thank you. But if there is anything anybody thinks of later on, please don't be afraid to either give me a call or drop me an email. More than happy, because I am really clear. The other thing, which again we have discussed, I do have some money on account, i.e. that we've an underspend from previous years. So we do have a little bit of additional funds that, whilst need to, I suppose, fit within the projects or within the priority, sorry, it could be something that may well just sit outside if it doesn't sort of fit the main criteria for a MOPAC. So there is a little bit of funding there which we can use. As Inspector Ballard has raised already, I was invited to New Scotland Yard recently in relation to talk to Commander Pavelin, just in relation to how safer neighbourhood boards are operating. Unfortunately, it was cancelled very last minute, so unfortunately, I hope to think that that date will come forward for another time. It would be useful to get a clear picture from MOPAC as to how we are going to move forward as a board. But I think the value of these boards is quite clearly seen by everyone else across each one of our, what do we call them, I suppose, boroughs, isn't it? Yeah, just boroughs, isn't it? And it's quite clear that they're being increased, not decreased. So so that was a really good sort of news story, really. So that's it from me. On to item number 8, any other business? Has anyone else got anything else they want to raise? I've got one point which I will raise, and it's really a massive thank you to the Metropolitan Police. I was a victim of crime, and I was assaulted while on my ward round 3 weeks ago. I rang 999. Within 8 minutes, I had 2 response vehicles on site. The individual that assaulted me was found, was stopped, was searched, was questioned, and then arrested. The items that they had on person was discarded. So not only did the officers decide at the time that this person was to be arrested, we also ended up with the dog team out. And I witnessed how the K9 team worked, and the dog found a jacket which was discarded in a front garden, together with a knuckle duster, which they went to assault me with. And as a result of that, criminal proceedings are underway. I can only thank the Met for what was an extremely professional service. Now, I know that they do their best, but this went beyond the call of duty, and I was absolutely just blown away by it, to be quite honest. What was quite traumatic time, to be honest, but it was important that I think that we raised that. I know that this is a difficult job that you guys have got to do. So Lee and James, honestly, just thank you, and I will be writing to the officers to say thank you for their professionalism, just across the board. It was absolutely brilliant. So thank you very much. Jags, have you got something you want to bring up?
Yeah, just very quickly. Well, sorry to hear about that, John, and I'm glad that it's sort of ended safely. Is the main thing, and positive outcome for yourself and the officers concerned. Just a quick one. I did put a request for agenda item in the future to talk about the Street Safe app, which I'd put through for in the future. Has that been considered? Because what I want to know is, can we have an update on that? Because we push it a lot, but I'm trying to understand the actual impact and outcomes from that reporting, because we got the community to do a lot of work on that. And I still get loads of people saying nothing's changed on certain areas. So this is where you report things where you feel unsafe on the app, whether it's street lighting, overgrown hedges, council issues, police issues, or etc. Is that possible for the next?
Jags, it was to be on the agenda for tonight, but we felt that the other two items were probably a little bit more. But it is definitely, and I'll assure you, will be going on the agenda for the next meeting.
No, that's absolutely fine. Tonight's agenda was excellent anyway, so it was,
yeah.
I totally get that.
Yeah,
Thank you. Cheers.
We sort of felt it didn't want to sort of take away from what were two very, very important items.
No, absolutely.
Lee.
Jackson, everyone else that's listening and online, can I just really emphasise that the more data we have via Street Safe, the better it is for everyone. We do monitor it. I will give a full update at the next meeting, but it is valuable information that we look at and that we do deal with. But a lot more to come at the next one. But the plug is just please, 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 as I do every meeting I go to, I try and get everyone to use Street Safe, and I mention it at the Southall Community Alliance. I mention it at every wall panel that I go to and every other meeting as well. So please, one plea from everyone is to use it.
And Lee, I don't disagree, and I know you plug it as much as I do, but it's like what we said earlier. The problem is people then fatigue kicks in. There's only so many times people will keep doing it. If we then share the outcomes, that yes, there might not be, their problem might not be solved, but actually this many are, then at least people have confidence in the system to say, okay, I'm not seeing the change I wanted yet, but at least all these other things have happened. And I think that's where we're all busy trying to get things done, but sometimes we just need to shout to give that confidence. It's a way of giving confidence back to people.
Okay, thanks, Jags.
Point noted. Thank you, Jags.
Paul Murphy's going to come in.
Just a really quick one, Jags, and just to build on what Lee was saying, really, and to provide a bit of assurance in relation to Street Safe. A tangible example of that, I think, is the monthly Borg deep dive that now takes place. It's relatively refreshed meeting that has been led by the police. They have a specific dedicated slide every month when they meet that specifically goes through what the Street Safe data has been. I appreciate this is a professionals meeting, so obviously we don't feed back necessarily on that, and that's maybe something that we could do better. But I do see for myself how it's informing tactical decisions about where resources are being deployed. I would also say that Ealing is, and probably thanks to the work that you've been doing, Jags, and others in terms of pushing it in the community, Ealing's using Street Safe a lot more than the other two boroughs at the moment in West area, and there's significant evidence of that. So that's something that maybe we can bring back when we discuss next time.
Yeah, Jags, I'm sure it will be an item on the agenda for the next meeting. 1 minute past 9. Thank you very much for everyone's attention and for attending this evening. And stay safe out there. And there's 3 words you take away from tonight's meeting. It is report, report, report. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Remember to come and get your uniform from Southall.